This plant has been growing in my mom's garden for a long time, but recently I realized just how massive it has become. This is Plumbago auriculata, commonly known as Cape Leadwort, blue plumbago, or sometimes just plumbago. This species is native to South Africa, where it grows in scrub and thicket habitats in valley bushveld. This habitat is described in a March 1991 article in the journal Veld and Flora as dense, sometimes impenetrable, succulent, and highly spiny thicket found in the river valleys of the Eastern Cape. This habitat makes sense when you examine the growth form of this species. Let me show you what I mean. Here is a plant that I encountered at the LA Arboretum last summer. This one is clambering up into a tree, making its way pretty high up there, which is a habit that makes sense if you are fighting for light in a thickly vegetated habitat. In cultivation, it can also be sheared into a hedge, which actually doesn't look half bad, in my opinion. Before observing this species closely and in multiple situations, I thought it generally remained a shrub, and a smaller one at that. I think my mom might have thought the same thing when she planted this one. It has totally overgrown the space it was provided, but I love it. We're going to do a major pruning on this plant at some point in the future, and I'm curious to see how it grows back. Stay tuned for that in a future video. Before we completely chop it back, I want to talk a bit more about this species. Plumbago gets its common name of leadwort from being a supposed cure for lead poisoning, but I would not recommend using it for that purpose today. Wort is just an old-timey word for plant. So whenever you see a name like leadwort or liverwort, the wort means plant. While we are talking about names, this species' Latin name is Plumbago auriculata. Plumbago again references the supposed cure for lead poisoning. Plumbum is the Latin word for lead. And the specific epithet auriculata means ear-shaped, and is based on the stipules, which are the little structures at the base of the leaf. One of my favorite, and sometimes least favorite, things about this species is that its fruit is sticky in a really interesting way. It's a lot like Velcro, and like Velcro, it tends to stick to things like your hair or your shoelaces. Plumbago also features pretty, usually blue, flowers. There are cultivars of lighter or darker blue as well as white. This plant will flower for a really long season, and it flowers on new wood, which means that trimming or shearing will not affect the next season's flowering, and will actually promote flowering by stimulating new growth. This specimen has been growing in my mom's yard in the San Francisco Bay Area for maybe 10 years. The soil there is very clayey. To my knowledge, this plant does not get too much water, and on the whole, I would say this is quite a drought-tolerant species. This makes sense based on that native range we discussed earlier. South Africa and California are climates with somewhat similar mild temperatures and a distinct wet and dry season, although these happen at different times for each place. I think this species does flower best with summer irrigation in dry summer climates. This species does best also in full sun or partial shade, and like I said, thrives in somewhat moist, loamy, well-drained soils, although we can see that it is also quite tolerant of deviations from these ideals. This plant is growing in USDA Zone 9B, and the other two are growing in Zone 10A. Plumbago is generally listed as hardy in Zones 8 through 11. In zones colder than these, it can supposedly be grown as a potted plant and placed in a sunny window in winter, but I have no experience with how well this species does indoors. If anyone has tried this, I would love to hear about it. So that's my experience with Plumbago auriculata. Let me know about your experience growing this species in the comments. I always love to hear. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in similar horticultural content, consider subscribing to my channel. I look forward to bringing you all along while I explore more horticultural topics like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video, and happy growing!